Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad Tehami. The United Nations Secretary General Mr. Antonio Guterres has once again called for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire as the situation in Gaza is concerned. He has also called for the unconditional release of all the captives held in Gaza by the Palestinian resistance group. Let me quote him what he had to say regarding the urgency of a complete humanitarian ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. A ceasefire will only be the start. It will be a long road back from the devastation and trauma of this war, unquote. Now, this particular development comes after Gaza's health ministry has said that owing to Israel's brutality, relentless bombardment against the innocent people in Gaza, so far, since 7th of October, 35,034 people have lost their lives, while this brutality of Israeli regime has resulted into wounding over 78,000 people. At the same time, Israel remains adamant of pressing ahead with a ground invasion and all-scale invasion on the southernmost city of Gaza Strip, that is Rafah, despite international condemnation regarding its plans of pressing ahead in Rafah. Earlier, the Prime Minister of Israel, Mr. Netanyahu, said, let me quote him, "If we must, we shall fight with our fingernails, but we have much more than fingernails," unquote. Now, this particular statement came after there was a stark warning that was issued by US President, the United States being the staunchest of the allies of Israel and had been backing Israel since 7th of October. But this was the starkest ever warning coming from President Joe Biden, saying in an interview, let me quote him, "I made it clear that if they go into Rafah, I am not supplying weapons," unquote. Now, this particular statement by Benjamin Netanyahu, after that particular stark warning by President Joe Biden, what does that basically depict? Is it blatant defiance of what the US aspires at this point in time as far as Israel's plans of its offensive in Rafah is concerned? We'll be taking the analysis on that. Also, at the same time, this particular position of the US has been once again reiterated by Secretary Blinken, also saying, let me quote him, "An all-out Israeli offensive on the Gaza city of Rafah would provoke anarchy without eliminating Hamas." Also, he had hinted that Hamas had already returned to certain areas of northern Gaza that Israel had liberated, quote unquote. Now, after this particular statement also, that when there was an objective that was stated by the Israeli regime at the outset of this particular invasion into Gaza of complete elimination of Hamas, but by looking at this statement by Secretary Blinken, that if they are pushing ahead with their plan to go into Rafah, Hamas is reappearing in the north of the Gaza Strip. What does that basically depict? Does it mean a complete defeat on the part of Israeli regime at the hand of this particular Palestinian group? Also, some other major developments regarding as to situation in Gaza. The talks were going on in Cairo, the capital of Egypt, for a ceasefire agreement. They haven't yielded any sort of a result. Also, in another major development, Egypt has said it will join the lawsuit of South Africa at the International Court of Justice. The Republic of South Africa has filed a lawsuit regarding the genocidal acts of Israeli regime already in the International Court of Justice, over which the International Court of Justice already had given the interim injunctions, but Israeli regime did not abide by those also. Also, we had seen in another development, the United Nations General Assembly had backed the Palestine's bid for a full membership at the United Nations also. The significance of that particular move also, will be taking the analysis on that. For that, we are honored to have been joined in the studio by Dr. Amna Mahmood, Foreign Affairs expert. Dr. Amna, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. We really appreciate that. On Skype, at the same time, we are honored to have been joined by Mr. G.R Baloch, former ambassador. Mr. Baloch, thank you very much for your time also, for being with us on the show tonight. We really appreciate that. Let me begin the discussion with you, Dr. Amna. Now, two very important statements we have seen on Wednesday in an interview. President Joe Biden giving a stark warning that if you go into Rafah, I'm going to hold the weapons supply. The next day comes a statement from Benjamin Netanyahu that we are going to fight with fingernails and we have got more than fingernails. Isn't it an open defiance on the part of Israeli regime to that ally which has been the staunchest of all?
Of course, it is the same. But we see that they have already given Israel the level of substance that, as he said, that we have much more than the fingernails. So they have already given, and they continued their supply. Number of consignments were released without the information of even Congress. And he has just curtailed the last consignment to show the nation that I have curtailed, and in favor of the statement he issued. I don't think that Israel ever honored any threat from US. They don't expect that, and US is having anything that is the lip service. You know that when even the resolution of UN for the ceasefire was passed, they said that it is non-binding. If it was non-binding, then why they vetoed first one? Why they vetoed second one? It means that it was binding, and that's why they were refusing. So Israel knew that they are standing behind Israel, whatever the case may be, and whatever Mr. Biden is saying, that is just a lip service to the audience listening for his election campaign. So he's doing so, and you see the defiance and protest and you know, people's reaction in American universities all over, that is spread all over. Actually, he is addressing those who are against this genocide. I don't think that is US and Mr. Biden is serious to curtail Mr. Netanyahu's any plan in Rafah.
Right. Hasn't there been any shift as far as the stance of the US administration in place at the moment is concerned? President Joe Biden, his high-ranking officials, a number of high-ranking visits on the part of Secretary Blinken himself. We saw at the very outset of this particular conflict, when there was an invasion that was unleashed by Israeli regime on the innocent people in Gaza, the US authorities defended the Israeli regime's move of having the right to self-defense, right? But over the number of months, as the time period has passed, now this particular conflict has entered in 7th month. We saw somewhere in the middle of this particular crisis, there was a statement by President Biden saying that if Israel continues with the relentless bombardment, is going to lose international support. From that particular statement coming to this particular statement, that if you're going to move ahead into Rafah, I am going to stop the weapon sales. Don't we see a shifting stance of the US administration and the person who is sitting at the helm in the US being
you are right. You are right. In terms of statements, it has changed. But I don't think that it is substantial in terms of the practical actions US is taking, because US could move immediately to UN Security Council for a binding resolution if they want to stop that genocide. Obviously, it's a genocide, and not only 35,000 as you just mentioned, but these are the direct casualties, those who are starving, those who are dying of wounds, those who are displacing from one place to another, those who are under the rebels. If you count that, that number has crossed 100,000, and that is the genocide taking place in presence of all these high level visits you just mentioned, and all those high level talks held in Cairo, in Qatar and elsewhere. So I don't think that Mr. Biden is taking any concrete action. Otherwise, Netanyahu cannot deviate if he will issue some warning that Israel would be stopped all humanitarian aid, Israel would be stopped from all the trades from United States. such statements would be having substance
Well,
otherwise.
these sort of reservations as far as Israel's plan to press ahead into Rafah is not only being expressed by the U.S. administration. There are other key allies also of that particular.
But you see the yesterday's UNGA resolution in favor of Palestinian
full
statehood.
I'll come to that particular point also. Let me proceed with the discussion. Mr. Baloch, when we talk about these two particular statements, what's your analysis? One coming a day before, and the next day, Israeli Prime Minister goes on to showing his resolve that they are going to press ahead with the invasion in Rafah. What sort of a message should be actually picked up by the US administration when there was a very clear-cut warning on the part of President Biden that if you are going to move into Rafah, I'm going to stop the weapons supply. Next day, Prime Minister Netanyahu says that even we have to fight with the fingernails, we'll fight, but we have more than that. What sort of a message should be received in Washington out of this particular statement by Netanyahu?
Mr. Jawad, basically, the present carnage being undertaken by the Israeli forces has many dimensions. I think one of the most important dimension is the political survival of Netanyahu himself. He has kind of embedded his own future into the continuation of this conflict as long as he can, along with his own Zionist cabinet. So that is a problem that now this cabinet, which is in power, that is Netanyahu and his Zionist cabinet members, they simply would let go this opportunity for them to survive as long as they can. And they would be chasing this illusion of elimination of Hamas, which has been now proven by many analysts that you cannot do it. As we all know that Hamas, apart from being a fighting force of the Palestinians in Gaza and an administrative structure as well, is also an idea, an aspiration of the people of Palestine. So the very fact that they are chasing such a elusive target or the war objective by itself says that they are not sincere in what they say and what they do. And obviously, there's a big gap in both the capitals, whether Washington or Israel, Tel Aviv, that they do not match their deeds with their words. There is a huge public consumption part of their statement because Netanyahu, as I said, needs to survive because the moment this operation comes to an end, that will be end of Netanyahu, and that is a consensus almost of all people, analysts who observe Israel's internal political situation. And then perhaps he will land up into jail for war crimes and for corruption that he has carried out. And he knows it very well. So basically his diehard statements that we'll fight with the nails, this is all for the public consumption, for the purpose of inciting the Palestinians and the Israelis, and also giving a message of being a very tough leader. As far as Biden is concerned, as we know that he's going into election year, they cannot be seen to be soft on Palestinians. They need to be showing the loyalty to the Israelis, but at the same time, they need to also assuage those feelings that have emerged. In fact, the campuses have risen against this massacre, and that again has created that sentiment in the US that US must draw a line where the line for the legitimate defense of Israel ends and where the slaughter starts. And it has started some of the last 7 months. In fact, as we all know, just to recall, this is the third slaughter, systemic slaughter by Israel of the Gaza residents. In fact, 67 and so on and so forth. So I think we cannot really take these statements alone in what they come out in terms of their
Right.
syntax. It is what is the intention behind it. Yes, Mr.
Right,
Jawad.
right. It's a very kind of a different situation as far as the U.S. administration's position at this point is concerned. As you have already rightly pointed out, the kind of activity that happened in various campuses, the kind of public sentiment that has prevailed recently in various U.S. campuses. Also, likewise, we have seen similar sort of sentiment in many of the European universities also. Well, on one side, there is a public sentiment of that particular sort. On the other, there comes an opposition and criticism regarding when the US administration issues a stark warning to Prime Minister Netanyahu. Now, Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell, after this particular warning by President Biden of holding the supply of the weapons is concerned, he has said, let me quote, if the commander-in-chief can't muster the political courage to stand up to the radicals on his left flank and stand up for an ally at war, the consequences will be grave. Now, what is the room available to the US administration led by President Joe Biden? Should it be giving heed to that particular prevalent public sentiment, or should it be keeping its view on what sort of outcome it might be looking forward to in the elections, or should it be giving heed to this particular criticism and the statements by the Republicans?
If you look at US, in fact, its alliance or just its blind support of Israel, and in fact the stranglehold of the Zionist lobby or Israeli lobby now in the US is astounding. It's like mind-boggling. There's such a democracy of 200 years, such a center of liberalism, free thought, freedoms, and so on and so forth. And they stand for this tiny minority which is against every human value, against every human covenant that the entire world kind of agrees to. So I think one feels really shocked to see that how limited space themselves they have created. See the other adverse impact of this Israeli influence on the overall body politics of US is that the space for intellectual freedom is shrinking. Imagine people, students being like thrown out of the top universities. They're being sanctioned. They've been, in fact, the faculty has been sent to jail for expressing. What have they been doing? They just set up camps to express themselves. So when there is a so-called a beacon of free thought, a leader of the free world, and it finds itself in such a situation, what to say? So I think there's a whole crisis, intellectual crisis, moral crisis. It's a crisis of legitimacy of their whole foreign policy in the Middle East, probably which has risen out of this blind support of Israel by the US administration, and especially the Democrats, which cannot make up their mind what to say and what not to say. And I think that is very dangerous, not only for the American leadership, which they claim to be leaders of the global order, but it is bad for the entire world who believe in the value system, who believe in the human values and what we call the global order. What will happen to the global order if the assumed leader of the global order itself finds in such a moral dilemma, such a situation where it cannot assert its own policy? So I think it's very shocking, and it's very disappointing to see the statements coming in from other such senators. The worst was by you must have heard the Republican Senator Graham says kind of word to that effect, that go and bomb Gaza out of it and get out of it. In fact, referring to the Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's shocking. It's shocking. I think the total bankruptcy of leadership total bankruptcy of any moral consideration in the statements coming from various leaders in the US.
Back to you. We are now joined by another participant on the phone line, Lt.Gen retired Talat Masood, senior analyst. General Masood, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. General Masood, now we are analyzing the two statements coming, one from US President Joe Biden and the other one the very next day, in a clear defiance of what had been the warning on the part of President Joe Biden by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. How do you analyze how the people at the helm in the US administration should be receiving this particular defiance on the part of Israeli Prime Minister?
Well, actually, if you come to think of it, they should really be highly upset, and their relationship with Israel must take a very serious turn. But as things stand, I think Benjamin Netanyahu is quite aware of the fact that America leans so much on them, and they can continue with pursuing their very hostile policies and policies that are really ruining the lives of the people in Gaza. And I think this realization is not that much in the U.S. And one does not really think that U.S. will take a very firm stand. It might repeat what it is saying and might withhold, certain assistance for a while, but that would be more symbolic and would not make much of a difference, because the statements that are emanating or coming out of the Israeli Prime Minister are so apparent that he would be flouting any sort of statements or policy changes, policy guidance from the U.S. that will be in contradiction to what the policies that he is pursuing.
Right. It's not only the U.S. administration at this point in time, but also likewise we have seen the foreign minister of the foreign secretary of the UK also warning against an all-out invasion into Rafah on the part of Israel, saying there is no clear plan at the hands of Israelis regarding advancing into Rafah. So it's not the US only which is opposing this planned invasion into Rafah. It's the other key allies also in the Western world. Do you think there is sincerity of thought this time around as they are looking towards a bigger scale destruction if Israel goes into Rafah with an all-out invasion into that particular city?
Yeah, you have actually put two questions. First, let me answer the first one. And that is, of course, UK follows more or less exactly the same policies that are pursued by the US. So there is a lot of harmony or sort of convergence in their thinking and policy formulation. So I think to expect that the UK would be taking another policy, direction would not be. I think that doesn't happen normally. So that is quite normal that UK supports US policies and will continue to do that in respect of the situation in Gaza. Now, as far as the human sort of displacement is concerned and the terrific fallout of that in the sense of the misery that it is creating amongst the people of Gaza and the type of, what they are going through at this moment, I think it is really a sad reflection on how the US and the Western world is just overlooking all that, although they keep on doing some lip service by making certain statements and trying to also advise Israel. But in fact, they are not really pressing hard against Israel to take measures so that this great humanitarian crisis that is taking place in Gaza is prevented.
So as far as Israel's perspective is concerned, let's take that one into account for a second. Considering Israel's objective of launching this invasion into the Gaza Strip post 7th of October, the complete elimination of the Palestinian group that it thought should be eliminated from that Gaza Strip. Now, one city after the other, until it reaches to a point that it is adamant of invading Rafah, despite this particular opposition by its key allies. Now, at that particular point, there comes a statement by Secretary Blinken saying that that Palestinian group had already returned to the certain areas of northern Gaza that Israel had liberated. What does that basically depict? Has Israel been defeated when it comes to its objective of the complete elimination of that particular Palestinian resistance group?
Well, what it means is that, truly speaking, it is impossible to sort of completely remove the resistance movement. They can probably occupy places, they can push the Gaza people, and but they cannot possibly, overcome the resistance. The resistance will always be there because the people will never accept the domination of Israel. So I think we have to understand that it is not just a question of physical space. It is also a question of whether they'll be able to sort of kill the resistance, the spirit of resistance and the spirit of freedom that is inculcated in this conflict.
This particular resistance, because looking at another statement by Secretary Blinken that an all-out Israeli offensive on Gaza city of Rafah would provoke anarchy without eliminating that Palestinian resistance group. So it is the admission of the fact that this resistance is not going to end, and there must be some sort of sanity that must be shown on the part of Israeli regime at the same time also. Isn't it so?
That they should show sanity, but they are not willing to show sanity. They think that, this is the time to sort of eliminate the resistance. And so I think Israel is in no mood to listen to even U.S. And as you know, the relationship between Israel and U.S. is such that it thinks it can defy the U.S. and get away with it, although the U.S. would be making statements in order to be on the right side of history.
One last important aspect. Now, when we talk about that case that was brought in by Republic of South Africa at the International Court of Justice, after which the ICJ held the hearings and then gave the interim injunctions, now there is a development that Egypt has decided to be the part of that lawsuit brought in by South Africa. How do you see this particular development? How this particular development is going to affect the entire equation?
Well, I think it will morally sort of put pressure on Israel. But as you know, Israel is in no mood. It is even defiant to sort of accept any moral posture. And so I would think that whereas it is good and it will bring some sort of a pressure, moral pressure on Israel, and it will also sort of lower the image of Israel further in the eyes of the world, and it will be a sort of a judgment of a neutral court regarding the conduct of Israel in Gaza. So I think all these things are favorable, no doubt, to the cause of justice and the people of Gaza. But what I would say that considering Israel's conduct and behavior and its policies, it's very unlikely that it will genuinely influence in any way what Israel is doing at present in the future.
Senior analyst, thank you very much for taking time out for Views on News tonight. We really appreciate that. Dr. Amna, now this particular, that's very sought for victory on the part of Israeli regime. Where do you see it standing right now with this particular statement coming from Secretary Blinken that it's that Palestinian resistance group has already returned into north, which Israeli regime already had liberated, and an all-out war into Rafah is going to create more anarchy without eliminating that resistance group?
Jawad, actually there are two dimensions of this problem. One is that Israel want to eliminate Hamas as the resistance group, and secondly they want to eliminate the total resistance of Palestinians. One thing is it may be possible that they can eliminate, they may kill a number of militants of Hamas. But isn't it
going to be perpetually elusive sort of is it even achievable?
It is not achievable. They can kill most of the what they call terrorists or activists of Hamas. They can be killed, but the resistance in a nation cannot be denied. They cannot be eliminated as long as that nation is there. That's why they are they are doing the worst kind of genocide, that they should create a sort of terror, fear among the Palestinians, and their children being born right now, and they are all watching. And that's why particularly they are hitting children of 15 years and below, that there should be no resistance, next generation for resistance, but it is not possible. If they would eliminate all Palestinian from this Gaza, even then the Palestinian living all over the world, living in West Bank, living in Jordan, in Egypt and US, everywhere, they would continue to have their sense of liberation and sense of resistance. They cannot eliminate Hamas, particularly they are from the Palestinian, they are actually the part of Palestinian nation, so they cannot identify, and they have claimed this, that they have eliminated Hamas for 4 months back when they pushed all these population to Rafah, and then they asked them not to come back to the even rebel of their homes. And now they are again claiming that they are hiding in Rafah. How it is possible? If they would have been eliminated, then how they are in Rafah? So eliminating all population from Gaza even then cannot eliminate the sense of resistance from Palestinian. They are a nation, and it is the history of humankind that no nation cannot survive without the feelings of freedom.
But looking at this statement by Secretary Blinken, isn't it a stamp on a big defeat of Israel already, that Hamas has already returned to certain areas of northern Gaza that Israel had quote unquote liberated, right? So if they thought they liberated the northern part of it and they were chasing them down to the south, and now Secretary Blinken saying that you are chasing them in the south, which is not of course going to eliminate it, but they have already returned to the north. So isn't it a stamp on the defeat, and that particular aim and objective of Israel still remains elusive and
I
it's not
think
achievable?
Secretary Blinken, he has been in touch with all, he has been aware of every moment of this war, from both sides, because he is in touch with all the neighborhood region and out of the region as well. One thing that he knew, but I think that Israel is taking it just a justification that they have gone there, so we are following there, and they are going on the other place, we are following them there. It is not possible. And what about anarchy? Mr. Blinken is asking about anarchy. Where is the government? Where is the legitimate authority of Gaza? Where is the government? Where is UN stands? There is anarchy in the world, and we have seen that UN has got irrelevant, because you have seen the many statements by UN Secretary General, and he is begging the world to stop this genocide. He is begging United States to not to do backing of this Israeli adventure, but there is no one to listen. There was
what's the way forward? If the UN has lost, as per your understanding, lost relevance, it has been asking the international community to stop this genocide. We had seen when there were earlier statements made by United Nations Secretary General himself, the kind of reaction that came from the Israeli high-ranking officials, even asking him to resign from his post at that particular time. We've seen the UN staff also coming under fire within Gaza Strip.
They are
Most
targeted.
recently,
They were targeted consciously.
UNRWA's building over their headquarters there in Palestine, been set alight also by the Israeli settlers. So what's the way forward?
I think that there is no way forward because all the nations here are watching and they are looking towards United States and its Western allies. The only solution will come that there would be another war like Ukraine, because as you see that was superpower outcome of superpower rivalry. Now there is a possibility that Russia would intervene, China would intervene, which they are not going right now because Russia is engaged somewhere. And the other solution is that the regional powers should come and they say that this is the right time, and this is the limit. And now we are going to intervene if Israel is going to attack on these Gazans, helpless and no more genocide.
So do you think when you talk about the regional countries, the immediate neighbor, Egypt, this particular move of Egypt deciding to go ahead in becoming the part of that lawsuit that was brought in by the Republic of South Africa.
But that is a great courage shown by Egypt. 4 months back in their assembly, the Camp David Accord was torn by a member of their legislature. They did. But this is the first concrete step that Egypt has taken. That is at the collapse of the talks going to which were
So do we understand the collapse of those earlier talks, and Egypt decides to go into the ICJ along with South Africa?
Because Egypt is saying that
does it reduce the probability or the possibility of the talks in future completely? Does it wash it completely in the future?
No, that would not happen because there is, if you will come out of the talk, then there would be no solution. Talks would continue, but that intensity of the matter is taking Egypt to the level that they are going to, because after Rafah, next would be the Sinai. Rafah is the last point where Palestinians are fighting for Arabian war actually.
Right. Mr. Baloch, when we talk about the position of Egypt, earlier the talks in Cairo are happening. Now the 5 men, that Palestinian resistance group, Israel, the US, Egypt and Qatar. Now they didn't yield any sort of result. Then Egypt decides to go into International Court of Justice in that particular lawsuit of Israel's genocidal acts in Palestinian territory. Now when we talk about that particular phase of talks, Egypt was one of the mediators in those talks. Now, by becoming the part of that lawsuit and becoming a direct party against Israel, do you think it's going to have any sort of an impact on the future talks if they happen?
See, the two things, that is in the realm of kind of speculation whether there will be future talks on the overall resolution of the Palestinian issue. But I would like to just comment on Egypt going as a party to the ICJ. I think it's very strong strategic message that Egypt has given, because what this states, or what it kind of reflects, is the continuation of delegitimization of the thesis on which this Rafah or the Gaza camp slaughter was kind of conducted by Israel, that it is a legitimate right of self-defense. So that case has been completely now shattered. Now Israel is committing genocide. The word is all there. The verdict is almost there. So I think there would be long-term implications of legitimacy of Israel. I would say that Israel by itself involving in genocide has put into question the very legitimacy of Israel as a state. In fact, the die-hard nationalist Arabs have always been saying that Israel is an illegitimate kind of an aberration of international order, but its very existence on the land of Palestine was not correct, morally not correct, legally not correct, historically not correct. So I think Israel by default, by unintended consequences, as they say, the rule of unintended consequences of this rule, of this campaign, has given legitimacy to those claims that Israel is actually part of that Zionist kind of scheme.
Baloch, point well taken. A very relevant point related to this particular thing. You mentioned that with the inclusion of Egypt as a party to that particular lawsuit at ICJ, the legitimacy because of its genocidal acts in Palestine of Israel will come into question. Now, when we talk about the right of the Palestinians of having a full membership at the United Nations, an overwhelming vote happened at the United Nations General Assembly with 143 voting in favor. What's the significance of that move as compared to when Israel will be losing its legitimacy with every single passing day because of its genocidal acts?
Definitely, it's a very, very important day for the Palestinians because they have been denied a right which is already enshrined in a UN resolution in which Israel was created. There will be two states, independent states, that the rights of the indigenous people or the existing population of Palestine or Arab population will not be violated. So I think it again the rule of unintended consequences comes into play, that how what actually Israel wanted to achieve from this was to eliminate completely the very existence of the Palestinian existence as a people. In fact, my thesis has always been that entire edifice of Israel's policy, whether it's a foreign policy or it's a military strategy, is based on this premise that they need to completely eliminate Palestinians as a people, as a culture, as an identity. But to the contrary to their expectations, this war has further, I think, galvanized the spirit of Palestinian nationalism. It has further given them legitimacy as a stakeholders for the future Palestinian states. Not only that, but the very Arab states which had signed peace treaties with Palestine, that's now Egypt coming on board, UAE itself kind of sponsoring this resolution, the UN has completely turned the table against Israel. In fact, I would summarize that Israel might have won small little street battles, but strategically this has been a strategic defeat of Israel, which will go a long way in completely neutralizing it as a potent force in the Middle East. And I think the case of Palestinians for a state has been further strengthened. Mr. Jawad.
Defeat for Israel. Dr. Amna, unfortunately short of time, one last quick comment regarding this particular UN vote for the Palestinians bid to be the full member of the UN.
It is very positive move, as Ambassador mentioned, and it is having significance that UAE they have turned and since they have entered into Abraham Accord and now they have deviated from their stated policy and they have come openly in favor of the Palestine. Secondly, if it is not provided Palestinians the right to vote in UN as a separate nation, but it has provided them number of concessions to have more rights in UNGA to participate in discussion as a separate nation.
So why did the US vote against it?
US voted.
Hasn't it been talking about the two-state solution?
Yeah, we have discussed that US is going in they are following dichotomy. On one side they give statements for the consumption of their public, and on the other hand they are taking firm stand with the Israelis, so they have vetoed. And since they have voted against here, so it is for probability that they would vote against them in UN Security Council as well when it go for it will go there for ratification.
Dr. Amna Mahmood, Foreign Affairs expert, thank you very much for taking time out for Views on News tonight. Really appreciate that. On Skype, we were honored to have been joined by Mr. G.R Baloch, former ambassador. Mr. Baloch, thank you very much for your time also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's episode. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves.